Hey guys, welcome to another video. Though I did a video kind of similar to this back in August, I believe. Um, in August, I made a video about 29 films that I've seen over the course of my life. So it's basically one film per year since I've been alive, of films that I kind of viewed as the best for each of those individual years that I've been around. But to kind of, since it's, 2019 was kind of the last of the decade for us, 2020 is the start of a new decade for everybody. I figured I would just take this video to kind of just focus on the 10 films of the 2010 decade that I kind of viewed as the best. So that's basically the best film of per year um, that I'm going to be covering on this list. Like my favorite film of 2010, favorite film of 2011, favorite film of 2019, that kind of thing. So even though there are really incredible films that came out over the course of the last 10 years, like I said, I did have to narrow it down to just one film per year, even though I am very much aware that, and it was very hard, believe me, to kind of just put one film for that one year, because we have had quite a few great films, specifically, years where we had two or three really good movies in that same year. That was kind of hard to narrow it down just to one for each of those individual years. So let's get started. I have 10 films that I want to talk about here. And like I said, these are kind of my personal favorite films. Definitely not representing like the AFI or anything like that. I'm sure they wouldn't have chose some of these films that I chose here, but these are just some personal picks for me that I thought were my personal favorites throughout the 2010 decade that kind of represent each of these individual years for me as far as the best in film goes. So in 2010, we have Inception. I'm a huge Christopher Nolan fan, though it was hard to choose between this one and Black Swan, another film I really liked a lot too. I think Inception ultimately is my favorite film of 2010 just because I've gone back to it so much. I just love Christopher Nolan. I love the way he makes movies. It's probably one of his more interesting character development films that he's made pretty much his whole life. I really like a lot of his movies. I would probably say The Dark Knight's my favorite, but that's a 2008 movie. But I thought Inception was definitely out of kind of his own ideas, out of, things that he's made that haven't been based on books or comic books or anything like that. I thought Inception was a very good idea for a movie. It was a great thriller, a great heist movie. A lot of things about the dream world that Christopher Nolan explored that we really never saw in a film before, like can people dream within dreams, and can people fall asleep in a dream and kind of go down an additional dimension in that dream and things like that. So there's just a ton of interesting things I love about Inception. It's easily my favorite film of 2010. In 2011, we had a really small thriller film that I really liked a lot called Source Code. It was a film by Duncan Jones, who's the son of David Bowie. I think Duncan Jones is a very talented director. Source Code is easily my favorite film he's ever worked on, even though I really liked Moon quite a bit too when he worked on that. But Source Code, it's a really good thinking man's movie. There's just a lot of things about it where when the reveal does happen, it does kind of add up with everything. I really was invested in Jake Gyllenhaal's character the entire film. I'm really invested in Michelle Monaghan's character, if I pronounced her name correctly, Michelle Monaghan. Her character was I felt very invested in her character, and I really wanted her and kind of Jake Gyllenhaal to get along during this whole time of trying to figure out this mystery that they only get 8 minutes to solve every, 8-minute sessions, but of finding out where the bomber was on the train and things like that. There's just so many things, great things about it. I keep returning to it, just like Inception. It's probably my favorite film of 2011. In 2012, we have not only my favorite film of that year, but probably one of my all-time favorite movies as well, just of all time, really. And that's Ruby Sparks. This is a very small film that came out in 2012 that I just keep going back to. I've even had it as my wallpaper on my computer at one point for the poster of this movie. There's just so many things I love about this movie. I just keep talking about it all the time with everybody. I've even tried to introduce my girlfriend to this movie, even though she thought it was a little slow for her tastes. But there's just so many great things about it. I love that it's about a writer and trying to, get through writer's block, and basically writing down what's kind of something easy for everybody to do is, what's the perfect partner you could ever have in your life, really. I think Ruby Sparks plays off of that really well. It also asks interesting questions on, like, if you could rewrite something about somebody, what would you change about them and things like that. And it shows kind of the consequences and sometimes even the rewards of that if it goes well. But Ruby Sparks plays around with so many great things that's both healthy and unhealthy in relationships, and it's just a film that I've constantly gone back to all the time. It's easily my favorite film of 2012. In 2013, we had another small comedy film that I absolutely fell in love with. It's another great romance comedy that I think is just really smart and appeals to an older audience, which we really don't get a lot of, and we really don't get a lot of films that do that successfully either. And that's the film Enough Said, with Julia Louis-Dreyfus and James Gandolfini. This is a really smart movie that has so many great jokes in it, and it has a great story, and it has great character development. You see the broken sides of people in times in the movie. It's definitely a film where even if I were to state my negatives with it, there really isn't a lot of it, and it's really just small things like maybe I would save that character for a different movie, or I would keep that moment away for a different movie and things like that. So it's just small little things about it that are really the only things I would really change about it, because it's almost a near perfect movie in my eyes. It's just a really great movie that I just can't recommend enough. Like I said, it has great character development. It has so many great commentary about people in general and things like that. Enough Said is my favorite film of 2013. In 2014, we had X-Men Days of Future Past. This is a film that I've constantly gone back to. Whenever it's on TV, I always find myself rewatching it. It's definitely a great time travel movie. It definitely asks a lot of human questions about, like, if hurting somebody or if not hurting somebody would change the future, what would you do about it and things like that. I thought it had so many great character moments, like with Wolverine and with Mystique and with Magneto and with even what's his name, Quicksilver. There's just so many really great things about it that I just absolutely love. It's definitely kind of my version of what a perfect X-Men movie looks like, where every character kind of gets their moment, and it's still a great, big, grandiose action movie at the same time, and it's still a time movie, and it's still a period movie because it takes place in the past. Or at least tons of scenes take place in the past, and then at least there's some scenes that take place in the future. But there's just so many great things about it. It's just definitely a movie where it's like everything I could ever ask for in a film is in this movie. So X-Men Days of Future Past is my favorite film of 2014. In 2015, this one was a very hard year as well, just like 2010. It was hard to choose between Inside Out, which is a Pixar film I absolutely love, and it's probably one of the most original movies I've ever seen. And then the film that actually did make it to the list, which was Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. I think why Force Awakens makes my favorite film of 2014 over Inside Out is The Force Awakens had a very difficult task of making sure that we're not just getting another prequel trilogy again. It really had to make sure that Star Wars fans were on board with what Disney kind of had in mind with a new trilogy and things like that. We were introduced to new characters, new planets, new things, while also being kind of keeping things in the realm of things that we're used to in a Star Wars movie. So there's just so many great things about it. J.J. Abrams did such a great job directing this movie. It also kind of showed kind of the better sides of Empire Strikes Back and New Hope, and applied them into a story that hasn't been told yet in Star Wars. J.J. Abrams used a lot of practical effects in the movie. There's just so many great things about this film that kind of reinvigorated my hope in film and really showed that, practical effects and character development, things that have worked in film all along, are still alive and well, even though they happen to be in a big budget film like this. So Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens was my favorite film of 2015. In 2016, I really saw a film that year that really was kind of the event film for me. It really was kind of an event film for everybody involved, because I saw it in a packed theater. I don't think there was a single seat left in the house for this movie. I think every seat was taken for this movie because it was such a big deal at the time. And it's still kind of a big deal. I own the soundtrack for this movie. There's just so many great things about it, where when I think of like golden age movies, I think of films like this, even if they aren't released in the golden age of cinema. And that's La La Land. Easily my favorite film in 2016. The musical numbers, the way that it shows kind of what's so great about cinema and that era of film and the golden age, and kind of what the golden age really was, and kind of when it had big stars like what Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling are to us right now, and things like that. There's just so many great things about it. I just felt so happy leaving the theater. There's moments where it breaks your heart. There's moments where you just absolutely fall in love with everything you're looking at. It definitely is a great example of a great set design in a movie. There's just so many great sets they used in this. La La Land is easily my favorite film of 2016. In 2017, we had the film Wonder Woman. I really love this film a lot. I love Gal Gadot as an actress. I think what I really loved about Wonder Woman, though, is it really was a human story. It really was about, two different people on different sides of the world, with Gal Gadot in this island of women and Chris Pine in the World War I era, and kind of just how it was such a difficult time for everybody, and how, when Diana Prince gets there, there's still things about her world that she's holding on to, but she's also realizing just how big World War I got, and just how devastating it got, and just how something as simple as taking out one person just isn't enough for a war like that. So it's a great superhero film. It's also a great World War I movie. It's also a great human story. It's also a story about just how complicated falling in love can be, and kind of how when something important is taken away from us, we really don't know how much we love something until it's gone, and things like that. There's just so many great moments in Wonder Woman. It's not just a great superhero film, it's just a great human condition story. Easily my favorite film of 2017, which was Wonder Woman. In 2018, we have Ralph Breaks the Internet. I loved the first Wreck-It Ralph film in 2012. Even though Ruby Sparks easily was my favorite film in 2012, I thought Ralph Breaks the Internet was just a great sequel. It really kind of continued that story in an interesting way. It wasn't just another video game movie. They brought that story to the internet, and how Ralph would adapt to it, and how Ralph would react to the games on the internet and things like that. It also had a lot of clever commentary about Wi-Fi and the human condition in the world of the internet era and things like that. So even though I bet in 10 or 20 years from now, there's going to be things in Ralph Breaks the Internet that are kind of old and outdated, I think people will remember it as kind of the film that represented the 2010s very well, and kind of how we relied on Amazon a lot, we relied on eBay a lot. We relied on, like Google, that Ralph thought was, a goggle company, and things like that. So there's just several commentary things about it, and I thought Disney really stretched their creative legs in all the right ways in this movie. And it was also a great continuation of Wreck-It Ralph from 2012. Ralph Breaks the Internet was my favorite film of 2018. In 2019, I know everybody's sick of me talking about this movie at this point. I just recently had to do my best of 2019 list and things like that. But it really is my favorite film of this year, of the last year we just got through, which was Richard Jewell. I absolutely love Richard Jewell. It's just such a great human story once again. It's based on a true story. You really felt sad for what Richard had to go with this real story, and just how the press kind of ate him alive during this time. You just felt really sorry for the guy. It's also a great story with great performances from Paul Walter Hauser and Kathy Bates and Sam Rockwell. It's definitely another great character chemistry kind of movie. Richard Jewell, I'll stop talking about it. I know everybody's probably sick of it by now. Richard Jewell is my favorite film of 2019. So that was my best of the decade films, you guys. Let me know down below what your favorite films of the past decade were. These are my personal favorites of each of these individual years, and I'll see you guys here for the next video.